It may shock you to hear this, but if this video found you, if you're hearing these words right now, it's not by accident. It means one undeniable thing: chosen one, your next step will shatter their entire control. Yes, you. Not a politician. Not a billionaire. Not some system or institution. You. And they're terrified of it. You felt it already, haven't you? That stirring in your spirit. That quiet pressure building in your chest. That inner knowing that you're meant to make a move, but the world keeps trying to delay you, distract you, deter you. Because they know. Deep down, they know your next step isn't ordinary. It's disruptive, transformational, divine. And before we go any further, let's amplify this frequency. Hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel if your spirit keeps bringing you back here. And comment 77 to send a signal straight into the heavens, a signal that says you're ready to break every chain, transcend every block, and reclaim what was always yours. Let the algorithm of the universe catch your vibration and multiply it. Play this video again and again if it resonates. Because energy compounds. And the more you hear this message, the more it awakens parts of you they tried to keep asleep. And I'll say this clearly: if you're not a true chosen one, you won't make it to the end. But if you are, you'll feel every word in your bones. Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Step That Breaks the Spell. Chosen one, listen closely, because this isn't just another motivational message. This is a cosmic alert. A divine siren blaring in the middle of your spiritual battlefield. Every system of control that has ever hovered over you, every mask it wore, every disguise it cloaked itself in, had one central mission: paralyze your forward movement. Not because you're weak, but because your momentum would dismantle their illusion of power. They've always known that your clarity would become contagious. That once you step, others will start waking up too. They never needed to lock you in physical cages. Not anymore. Modern control is subtle. It smiles while suppressing. It tells you to stay humble when what it really means is stay small. It tells you to be grateful when what it's really saying is don't ask for more. It wraps itself in soft-spoken manipulation, family traditions, workplace protocols, cultural conditioning. It doesn't chain your body, it sedates your intuition. But guess what? That sedation is wearing off. And they're feeling the tremors of your awakening. Because something ancient is moving inside you now. You're feeling things that don't make sense to your rational mind. You're pulled toward unfamiliar paths, nudged by dreams that feel too big for your background, too wild for your resume. And yet, they won't leave you alone. These aren't just goals. They're spiritual coordinates. Encoded assignments. Instructions encrypted in your soul before birth. And the moment you take even a small step in that direction, you collapse entire timelines that were built on your stagnation. You see, your inaction is what they counted on. Your doubt was their scaffolding. Your silence was their throne. But every time you break that inner barrier, every time you defy the whisper telling you it's not time, you swing a wrecking ball into the fortress of illusion. You weren't made to live on repeat. You weren't made to recycle other people's fears, to regurgitate inherited limitations, to reenact family trauma as if that's your final act. You were made to rupture the rhythm, to disturb the narrative, to rewire everything. The voices that say you're being impulsive, they don't know what it means to be divinely led. The ones urging caution, they've never walked with fire in their bones. The ones demanding proof before action, they've never heard heaven's instructions in a whisper, in a vision, in a dream. But you have, and it won't let you rest anymore. That hesitation you're feeling isn't intuition, it's programming. It's the residue of lifetimes of suppression. It's the energy of systems that relied on your amnesia. But that fog is thinning. The veil is lifting. And behind that doubt is raw clarity waiting to burst through. That clarity is your soul screaming, a move. Now. Even if you're shaking. Especially if you're scared. Just move. Because this step isn't just about you, it's about everyone watching you in silence, praying for a sign that they too can break free. It's about the ancestors who dreamed of this moment but didn't have the tools. It's about the future generations who will be born into a world you helped shift. This is how ripple effects begin. Not with loud declarations. Not with grand revolutions. But with a quiet, fearless decision to trust your own divine intelligence over their counterfeit authority. Your next step is spiritual warfare. It disrupts old contracts. It breaks invisible oaths. It calls your power back from every place it was stolen, drained, mocked, or forgotten. And when you move in truth, even slightly, you shake dimensions. So I'll ask you again, and this time, feel it in your chest. Will you let fear speak louder than your soul? Or will you rise, even trembling, and take the step that breaks the spell? Chapter 2, the system was built on your silence. Chosen one, if you've ever wondered why they tried so hard to keep you quiet, why your voice has been dismissed, ignored, mocked, silenced, or twisted since childhood, it's because your voice was never ordinary. Your words didn't just carry sound, they carried frequency. And frequency is dangerous to control systems. Your very sound disrupts illusion. Your truth disturbs falsehood. Your presence unsettles what was built on deception. You were never just someone with opinions. You were someone with vision. And vision terrifies those who rely on shadows. From the moment you arrived on this planet, they knew you weren't here to blend in, you were here to break spells. To question the script. To challenge the structure. And that's why the system reacted the way it did. The control structures you see around you, government, media, religion, education, even certain family traditions, weren't constructed for your freedom. They were engineered to suppress your remembrance. Because when someone like you starts remembering, the illusion begins to die. You were taught early on to doubt yourself. Not because you lacked wisdom, but because you had too much of it. Your questions were inconvenient. Your observations too sharp. Your spirit too unshakable. Your empathy too deep. Your refusal to blindly follow made them nervous. So they did what all control systems do when they encounter unmanageable light. They tried to label it, cage it, shame it, dim it. They called you rebellious, dramatic, overthinking, unstable. But those labels were never reflections of your flaws, they were strategies to weaken your perception. Because you saw too much. You felt too much. You remembered too soon. And they couldn't afford to let you speak from that space. Every time you chose silence instead of truth, just to avoid conflict, just to keep the peace, just to stay liked, they won. Every time you swallowed your knowing, every time you dimmed your intuition, every time you let someone else's comfort outweigh your clarity, they strengthened the very prison built to contain your soul. But what they didn't prepare for was you remembering. You remembering the feeling of speaking from your gut and watching the energy in a room shift. You remembering how your mere presence made liars stutter, manipulators stumble, and those who wear masks grow restless. You remembering that your truth, unfiltered, unpolished, unapproved, burns through illusion like fire. They thought time would wear you down. They thought pain would numb you. They thought you'd eventually surrender, settle, soften. But instead, time became your teacher. Pain became your purifier. And now, you're not just speaking again, you're vibrating truth. You're transmitting power. You're moving like thunder wrapped in human form. Not just with your words, but with your actions. Your alignment. Your silence when sacred. Your no-s, your exits, your boundaries, your unapologetic light. And when you live like that, you don't just shift your own life, you start shaking foundations. They built this entire system like a house of cards. And your voice is the wind. Your movement is the match. Your decision to be real is the earthquake they never saw coming. Every time you reclaim your truth, cracks spread through their design. Every time you honor your knowing, their scaffolding weakens. Because this system was never built to withstand the full frequency of a liberated soul. You are not just freeing yourself. You are unraveling a matrix. And that's why everything got louder right before your breakthrough. That's why the distractions intensified. That's why people turned against you. That's why the pressure felt unbearable. It wasn't a sign of failure, it was the resistance of a dying spell. Because just before illusion collapses, it panics. Just before a stronghold crumbles, it fights to stay alive. But it can't. Not against a chosen one who's decided to stop apologizing. Not against a soul who's done whispering. Not against a being who now walks fully in frequency, aligned, awake, and unafraid. The silence has broken. The dam has cracked. And the very system they built on your stillness, it's collapsing under the weight of your awakening. Keep moving. Keep speaking. Keep disrupting. Keep being. You were never too much. You were never the problem. You were exactly what they feared. And now you're becoming what they can't stop. Chapter 3, the moment they lose grip. They don't lose control when you scream. They don't lose control when you fight back in anger. They don't even lose control when you expose them or call them out directly. No, they lose control the moment you detach. The moment you stop explaining. The moment you stop proving. The moment you stop needing anything from them, validation, acknowledgement, apology, attention. That's when their grip slips. Not because you got louder, but because you got clearer. You see, their power was never real power. It was illusion, crafted from fear and fed through repetition. It was an emotional spell, built not on strength, but on your uncertainty. They never needed chains. They tethered you with guilt. They wired your nervous system with shame. They trained you to seek approval and fear abandonment. But once you see it, once you recognize the game, the spell begins to break. You've outgrown the bait. You no longer react the way you used to. You don't flinch at the same insults. You don't dance to the same manipulative rhythms. They tried to make themselves your god, acting as if their opinion of you was the final word. They spoke as if their approval determined your worth. They punished you with silence, with withdrawal, with blame. But what they never expected was that you'd stop listening to them and start listening to a higher voice. Your own. Now you've heard that voice, and you can't unhear it. You've felt that surge of alignment, that undeniable knowing that blooms in your chest and tells you, this is the way. You've tasted clarity, not the kind that comes from logic or advice, but the clarity that comes from soul memory. And now, their tricks don't work anymore. Fear no longer manipulates you because you've sat with it. You've stared into the abyss and made peace with the unknown. You've made your shadow and refused to run. And in doing so, you become unshakable. They can see it in your eyes now. That stillness, that sacred silence, that refusal to flinch, to explain, to shrink. And it terrifies them more than any rebellion ever could. Because when you stop needing their validation, their punishment becomes meaningless. When you stop performing the role they wrote for you, the entire play begins to fall apart. The mask slips. The narrative unravels. And suddenly, they're left standing in a room full of props, trying to act out a scene that no longer holds your energy. Your peace is protest. Your boundaries are rebellion. Your joy is anarchy in the face of their illusion of control. You've exited the script. You're not improvising, you're transcending. You're not reacting, you're remembering. You're not fighting them anymore because you've realized there's nothing to fight. They don't know what to do with that. So they poke. They provoke. They try to revive old stories, stir old wounds, awaken old guilt. They'll bring up the past. They'll use others to speak for them. They'll test you, waiting for the old version of you to show up. But it doesn't land the same. It doesn't stick anymore. Because you've changed. You've recalibrated. You've stepped into a new frequency, and that version of you they had power over no longer exists. You've evolved. You've reclaimed your name. You've remembered who you are, and more importantly, you've remembered who they are not. They are not your judge. They are not your teacher. They are not your source. They are not your God. This is the moment they lose grip. This is the moment their strategies stop working. This is the moment their control evaporates, not with a scream, but with your quiet exit from their game. Because now, your steps echo louder than their threats. Your silence cuts deeper than their accusations. Your alignment outshines every manipulation. You don't need revenge. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need closure from someone still operating in confusion. Your next move is enough. Not because it screams, but because it's rooted in truth. Not because it seeks to punish, but because it refuses to participate. And it will shake them to their core. Because there's nothing more terrifying to a controller than losing control over someone who no longer needs to be controlled. Chapter 4, Your Frequency is the Revolution. Chosen one, you've been taught to think of revolution as something loud, something chaotic, bloody, messy. You were shown images of riots, shouted slogans, and burning symbols. You were told that to revolt is to rage, to destroy, to be loud enough to disrupt. But real revolution? The kind that rewires timelines, that shifts planets, that liberates generations? It starts in frequency, in the invisible realm, in vibration, in energy, in your quiet, stubborn refusal to match the vibration of oppression. It begins not with noise, but with resonance. It starts in the moments no one sees, when you say no to what drains you. When you walk away from the patterns you inherited. When you choose peace over chaos. When you heal instead of hate. When you pause to feel instead of numb. When you choose to remember instead of conform. That's where the real war is won. That's where the frequency of revolution is birthed, not in protest, but in personal alignment. And you, yes, you, are now operating from that new frequency. Your energy has changed. And that's not poetic fluff, it's spiritual physics. You've recalibrated. You've shattered illusions and stitched yourself back together with truth. You've grieved in silence. You've forgiven people who never asked. You've spoken life into yourself when no one else would. You've grown in the wilderness without applause, without instructions, without guarantees. You didn't just survive, you evolved. And that growth has made you dangerous. Not because you're violent, but because you're free. Because now, you're not trying to fight the system, you're transcending it. You're not screaming into the void anymore, you're radiating a frequency that short-circuits their control panels. They can't decode it. They can't track it. They can't mimic it. Because it's not programmed by them, it's sourced from something higher. Something ancient. Something eternal. You walk into rooms now, and the energy shifts. The atmosphere adjusts. People feel you before you even speak. Your vibration announces you. Your presence reveals the truth they were trying not to see. Some are drawn in, hungry to remember what you remind them of. Others are repelled, unable to withstand the mirror you've become. But none can ignore you. Because what you carry is not noise, it's resonance. Not rebellion against people, but resistance against low frequencies. The frequency of shame, of fear, of scarcity, of guilt, of manipulation masters order. You're no longer vibrating at the level of control. You're operating from the level of creation. And when you move in love, real, embodied, unapologetic love. When you speak truth that doesn't attack but liberates. When you stand in power that isn't loud but undeniable. Their weapons stop working. They throw confusion, but you stay centered. They project fear, but you respond with clarity. They try to bait your lower self, but you've elevated past the point of engagement. They can't trap you in their matrix anymore because you've updated your entire system. You're not just walking anymore. You're transmitting. Every step you take is sending out codes. Every boundary you hold is creating ripples. Every time you choose peace over panic, clarity over chaos, you destabilize the system they tried to keep you trapped in. You've become a walking portal, a living disruption, a breathing contradiction to everything they taught us about power. You're not pushing people, you're pulling them into a new vibration. You're not converting anyone, you're simply existing in your truth, and that is the invitation. You've become the quiet proof that there is another way, and your existence gives others permission to awaken too. Without even trying, you're causing others to confront their own illusions, to reevaluate, to unravel, to awaken. That's the true power of a frequency-based revolution. It doesn't burn buildings, it burns illusions. It doesn't attack people, it dismantles programming. It doesn't seek vengeance, it restores alignment. And the most revolutionary thing you can do right now? Stay in your power. Stay in your peace. Stay in your alignment. Stay in your truth, even when it shakes you. Even when it isolates you. Even when it costs you the familiar. Because your frequency is already doing the work. It's already cracking the walls. It's already melting the masks. It's already shifting everything they told you was unchangeable. And whether they admit it or not, the system feels it. Their control structures are trembling. Not because you fought them, but because you outgrew them. And now, with every breath you take in this higher resonance, you are becoming the revolution they never saw coming. Chapter 5, You were always the trigger. It's time to say it clearly, you were never the problem. You were always the trigger. The spark. The frequency anomaly that caused glitches in their system. You were the signal flare in the dark, sent to expose what was hidden, to unravel what was false, and to awaken what was sleeping. Your very presence made them uncomfortable, not because you were wrong, but because you were real in a world addicted to masks. You didn't have to shout. You didn't have to prove yourself. Just existing in your truth was enough to activate a disturbance. You were the one who made them feel everything they spent their lives suppressing. Their insecurities, their shame, their guilt, their illusions. You made them feel seen, and that terrified them. Because being seen means having to confront yourself. And they weren't ready to face what they'd buried, not ready to examine the lies they'd learned to live inside of. That's why they feared you. That's why they tried to silence you, contain you, distort you. Not because you were broken, but because you were whole in a world that profits from fragmentation and disconnection. You were authentic in a culture built on performance. You had integrity in a structure that feeds on manipulation. You moved in alignment while others moved in agenda. And that made you the unpredictable variable in their equation of control. The part they couldn't anticipate. The piece that wouldn't submit. The element they couldn't override. From the moment you began to wake up, when you started questioning, remembering, reclaiming, resisting, they felt it. Even if they didn't understand it consciously, something in their spirit sensed the shift. You were no longer playing the role. You were no longer shrinking to fit. You were no longer pretending to believe what no longer resonated. You began to reclaim your name, your energy, your truth, and that reclamation made their carefully crafted illusions feel unstable. And every step you took toward truth shook the foundation of their illusions. It wasn't what you said, it was who you were becoming. They noticed when you stopped apologizing for your light. They noticed when you stopped explaining your decisions. They noticed when your energy stopped bending to accommodate dysfunction. They noticed, and they panicked. Because control relies on predictability. And once you started honoring your truth over their comfort, once you stopped responding the way they expected, you became unpredictable. And therefore, uncontainable. They wanted you to doubt yourself so they wouldn't have to question their own reality. They wanted you to dim your light so their shadows could remain unchallenged. They wanted you to stay confused, compliant, and codependent because that made their illusion feel safe. It gave them something to stand on, even if it was built on your silence and self-betrayal. But now, the light is too bright. The facade is cracking. The performance is failing. And your next step might be the final blow to everything they built on borrowed power. You're not just walking into purpose, you're dismantling the control grid with your presence. You weren't meant to fit in their system. You were meant to end it. Not with violence, but with truth. Not with revenge, but with radiance. Not by fighting the old, but by embodying what's real. Every step you take now is a sacred act of rebellion. Every choice is a vibration rippling across timelines. Every boundary, every breath, every realignment is a cosmic message: the old ways are over. You are living proof that their systems can't hold a fully awakened being. You are the glitch in the matrix, the error in the code, the prophecy they tried to suppress. You are the frequency they hoped would never activate, but it did. You were the trigger all along. The one who forces people to see themselves. The one who breaks the loop. The one who ends the performance. The one who turns old cycles into ashes and walks forward carrying only what's true. And now, the countdown has begun. Not toward destruction, but toward liberation. Your next step? It doesn't just move you forward. It flips the entire game. And nothing, absolutely nothing, will ever run the same again. Chapter 6. When you move, the grid shuts down. Chosen one, there is a grid, an invisible energetic web that's been woven over humanity for centuries. Not made of wires or steel, but of belief systems, emotional traps, and psychological conditioning. A network of control disguised as culture, tradition, logic, and responsibility. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It hides in the everyday. It whispers into minds, seeps into family expectations, programs hearts through repetition, and distracts souls with shiny objects and shallow definitions of success. And the wildest part? Most people walk through their entire lives unaware that they're even plugged into it. But you've always felt the glitch. You noticed the static when others didn't. You questioned things that made everyone else nod in agreement. You sensed the fog long before you had language for it. Something inside you always knew the script you were handed didn't align with the role your soul was here to play. You may have tried to ignore it for a while, but the static never stopped humming. And now? You're no longer ignoring it. You're tracing it to its source. You're ready to do what the grid fears most. Because here's the truth, this grid doesn't fear noise. It doesn't tremble at protests. It doesn't panic at rebellion performed for cameras. No, this grid fears something much more dangerous. It fears a fully awakened soul moving in quiet, certain alignment. A soul that is no longer asking for permission. A soul that no longer believes in the illusion of authority. A soul that has remembered its blueprint and is ready to move as instructed by the divine. That's the kill switch. That's what they can't predict. That's the variable they cannot control. Because once a chosen one starts moving, not from fear, not from wounded ego, not for performance, but from divine clarity, the grid around them begins to short-circuit. The illusion breaks. The programming malfunctions. The very foundation of control starts to tremble and lose coherence. It starts subtly. You step out of a toxic relationship, and suddenly, that person's power games don't work anymore. Their web begins to unravel. You leave a job that siphons your soul, and the cracks in that system, once hidden, begin to expose themselves. You say no to what you used to accept, and like clockwork, the illusion begins to lose its grip. Because when you unplug your life force from false systems, they lose fuel. You were the power source all along. The greed wasn't operating on its own energy, it was feeding off you. Your people-pleasing. Your perfectionism. Your fear of judgment. Your generational guilt. Your tendency to overgive. Your belief that you needed to earn your worth. Every ounce of uncertainty kept the machine alive. But now, you've stopped feeding it. You're done apologizing for being too much. You're done asking others if you're allowed to be yourself. You're done entertaining contracts your soul never signed. Now you're moving. Now you're listening. Now you're following those strange inner nudges that bypass logic but feel undeniably sacred. You're acting on dreams that make no worldly sense but feel written in your bones. You're walking away from what once defined you and stepping into the unknown, not blindly, but with supernatural faith. Because you're not chasing anymore. You're aligning. You're remembering. And every step you take in that frequency, it sends shockwaves through the matrix. Relationships begin to glitch. Systems start to lag. People who once towered over you can't seem to find their footing anymore. The roles they assigned you no longer fit. The words they used to control you now sound empty, almost comical. You are no longer reacting, you're creating. You are no longer surviving, you're transmitting. It's not magic. It's not rebellion. It's physics. The field is shifting because you are shifting. Your vibration has changed, and the old patterns can't survive in your new resonance. You are a frequency spike, a walking data breach, a living quantum anomaly, a soul that slipped through the cracks of the simulation. You weren't supposed to wake up like this, but you did. You remembered. And now every step you take is a signal to the collective that freedom is real. That there's a way out. That the cage was never locked. That the chains were never real. That the system was built to collapse the moment someone stopped believing in it. They can't replicate that. They can't suppress that. Because what fuels you now isn't ego or validation, it's divine memory. And when you move from that memory, you don't just heal yourself, you activate others. You remind them of what's possible. You remind them of what they forgot. So don't hesitate. Don't wait for a clearer sign. Don't wonder if you're too much, or too late, or too far gone. That doubt is just the last echo of the grid trying to get one more drop of energy out of you. Don't look for applause. Don't look back. Don't play it safe. Just move. Move like your ancestors are watching. Move like your future self is cheering. Move like every step you take is shutting down an old lie, and it is. Because when you move in divine alignment, the grid around you shuts down, and everything that was built to control you, it short-circuits in your presence. Chapter 7. This is how empires fall, quietly, then all at once. Chosen 1. History loves to dramatize collapse. It shows us images of fire, uprisings, wars, loud revolutions. It teaches us that empires fall only with explosions, only when masses rise with torches and chaos floods the streets. But that's not how most of them fall. The truth is, empires rarely collapse in noise. They fall in silence first. In private moments. In quiet awakenings. In a whisper that defies centuries of shouting. In one soul who refuses to keep pretending. One spirit that decides to remember. One heartbeat that pulses outside of their rhythm. And if you haven't realized it yet, you are that soul. The awakening begins with you. The empire you're dismantling isn't confined to political borders or visible systems. It's deeper. It's older. It's the spiritual empire, the one designed to control the unseen layers of humanity. The empire of mental prisons, of inherited trauma, of religious guilt, of ancestral silence. It's not made of stone and steel. It's made of programming, beliefs passed down like sacred law, wounds recycled like family heirlooms, lies normalized until they feel like home. And it has fed itself for lifetimes on your compliance, your survival mode, your inner hesitation. But the moment you stopped complying, something trembled at the core of that system. You stopped shrinking yourself to fit into rooms that couldn't contain your purpose. You stopped apologizing for your brilliance, your knowing, your sensitivity. You stopped waiting for permission to move. You stopped bargaining for scraps of love, of worth, of peace. You stopped trying to translate your frequency into a language they could understand or tolerate. And that was the first earthquake. It may have seemed small at the time. Saying no when you usually say yes. Choosing solitude over fake belonging. Letting go of roles, people, and labels that no longer matched your vibration. Speaking your truth even when your voice trembled. Trusting your intuition instead of obeying the logic of fear. Those moments might have looked ordinary, but each one sent tremors into the grid. Because their entire structure was built on your yes. And when you began saying no, the foundation cracked. You were the keystone. You were the hidden pillar beneath the surface, the one holding up emotional economies, codependent dynamics, spiritual systems. You held space for others. You absorbed their chaos. You made yourself small so others could feel big. You carried the weight of entire ancestral lines and didn't even realize it. But now, you've remembered. You've stepped back. You've laid it down. And what they built on your back, it's crashing down under its own facade. They called you unstable, too intense, too unpredictable. They tried to label you, box you, break you. But those were never diagnoses, they were deflections. Because your freedom exposes their illusion. Your healing reflects their bondage. Your light burns away their shadows. You are the unfiltered mirror they cannot bear to face. And now you've unplugged. You've reclaimed your energy, and their illusion is gasping for air. This is not destruction. This is divine correction. What's falling was never real to begin with. You didn't set it on fire, you just stopped fanning the flames. You didn't pull it down, you just stopped holding it up. And when the chosen one stopped pretending, systems fall. That's how empires truly end. Not always in revolts or flames, but in a million sacred refusals. Refusals to stay silent. Refusals to keep performing. Refusals to betray your own knowing for the sake of false peace. Refusals to dim yourself for collective comfort. And your refusal to stay asleep? That was the final fracture. The unrepairable crack. The signal to the universe that a new order is forming. Your very presence is prophetic now. You are living proof that the old grid has no hold over awakened energy. You are walking proof that what was once considered normal now feels intolerable. You are the evidence that what once ruled the collective can no longer rule you. Your alignment is thunder. Your breath is revolution. Your next step is prophecy in motion. They built their system on the assumption that you would never change. But you did. They counted on your fear. But you answered the call. They bet on your forgetfulness. But you remembered. And now, as you move, speak, breathe, choose, you're rewriting reality itself. You're creating blueprints for others to follow. You're becoming the frequency they never wanted anyone to reach. Because when a chosen one truly awakens, they don't just shift their own life. They shift the world. And from this moment forward, nothing will ever be the same again. Not for you. Not for them. Not for this entire reality. Chosen one, if you've made it to the end of this message, that alone is confirmation you're not just hearing the call, you are the call. Your next step holds power beyond what you can see right now. It's not just about you, it's about every soul your courage will liberate. The system is trembling because you're no longer under its spell. So take the step. Burn the script. Walk in your truth, boldly, unapologetically, divinely. Like this video if your spirit resonated. Comment 77 to send a signal to the universe that you are moving in alignment. Subscribe to stay connected to this frequency. And replay this whenever doubt tries to creep back in. Let the energy keep activating you. Because, chosen one, they had control until now.